Welcome back. Well, over the last few days, you would have seen our international correspondent, Simon Marx, reporting along with the rest of us here. You've seen him in our studio. You saw him reporting from the G20 over the weekend. Normally, you see him in Washington, D.C. or somewhere else in the world. And the fact is, we don't get to see him in South Africa as often as we would like. And from what he tells me, he's still getting used to our how-felt thunderstorms. So we thought we would take the chance to ask him some questions before he jets back off to the United States or somewhere. Simon, good afternoon to you. We've been watching you over the last few days. One thing I realised is that while I know you didn't grow up here, you clearly have a deep love and affection for Mzansi.
I do, and it's a family connection. I am the son of a South African mother. My mother was born here in Johannesburg, studied at Wits. My grandparents are buried here in Johannesburg. She left in about 1958 when she was in her early 20s, moved to the UK, didn't return. Actually, interestingly, when we were cleaning out my late parents' now home in London, I discovered a letter from the British government's colonial office that had been sent to my grandfather in 1922, giving him formal permission to emigrate to South Africa, with this wonderful line about, "We hope you won't forget the old country and we hope you'll stay in touch and let us know how things are going." So, my mother grew up in Hillbrow and Berea, very different times, obviously, and I think, to some extent, I feel an affinity with the place that I can only explain through that kind of familial connection.
It's funny because when you have been to a place, when you have any link to a place, when you report on it later, you really think of it in a very different way.
Yeah, and I was very lucky because I've had the opportunity to come here on numerous occasions, often working for Newzroom Afrika and South African broadcasters, but often also working for international broadcasters. I was actually just digging it out. I think we can perhaps roll a clip. I found on YouTube a piece that I did 35 years ago in August of 1990 for an American TV channel. It was actually for the Discovery Channel, had a nightly news program at the time, and a state of limited emergency had just been imposed on various settlements because of violence in Kagiso. So I was covering that for American television and produced a whole long series of reports that year in 1990 that related to the nascent changes that were just beginning, the negotiations that were underway between the then apartheid government, Madiba, and all the other political players at the time here. Went out to Ulundi, interviewed Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. So we got to see a lot of the country, and that was my first sort of real opportunity to be here, a long time ago now.
It was a long time ago. Let's have a quick look.
The townships, stricter ones, will soon be implemented. For World Monitor, I'm Simon Marx. In the next few days, the government says it will drastically increase the police and army presence in the townships. They've also been granted a wide immunity from prosecution in powers that will remain in force for at least 3 months. In a statement issued tonight, the ANC said it viewed the emergency measures with concern, saying it wasn't convinced the police would act impartially in the townships. That's in stark contrast to yesterday, when Nelson Mandela called on the government to send more police in to try and stop the fighting. The government says if today's measures don't bring peace to the townships, stricter ones will soon be implemented. For World Monitor, I'm Simon Marx.
He hasn't aged a bit.
I was going to say, like me, it's funny how a voice doesn't change, but the hair does.
You've got to keep the voice, especially in the United States. If you're reporting for international outlets and you want to be the foreign correspondent in the US, you've got to keep the accent.
So you've been back with us. It's been wonderful to have you.
It's been fantastic to be here.
You were at the G20 and you were part of our team there. How did you find the South African experience of hosting the G20 as part of us, but someone who lives somewhere else?
Well, I mean, the whole experience was fascinating. I was saying to Iman yesterday, what an absolute privilege. How lucky are we to have been there and to have seen it, because this was such a seismic moment for South Africa, a seismic moment for Gauteng, a real opportunity, as the government and the G20 organisers did, to prove that, yes, this country absolutely could bring this off, despite all the questions that continue to reverberate about whether, many of the changes that were made in Gauteng in the run-up to G20 can be sustained going forwards. And also a seismic weekend in terms not just of South Africa's relationship with the United States, but I think the global relationship with the United States. I think that G20 summit, that weekend here in Johannesburg at Nasrec, is going to be seen as a page turn in the international relationship with Washington because of the way in which the Trump administration absented itself from all involvement and allowed the rest of the world basically to send a message to Washington, D.C. that they had inflicted marginalization on themselves.
I mean, you have to leave us now, and I mean, you'll be coming from South Africa, so I hope they let you back in. If they don't, you're welcome to come back to us. You're going to be focusing on things that come out of Washington, and there seem to be two big things that the US is at the center of. The one is the Middle East, and I'll come to that in a moment, but the other is the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Trump administration is sort of trying to push a peace deal. Ukraine and most of Europe seems against it. How do you see this all playing out?
Well, so there's talks taking place today in Abu Dhabi between the US Army Secretary and Russian officials after, what was going on in Washington while we were all covering the G20 was absolutely extraordinary. The US administration, President Trump, publishing a 28-point peace plan for Ukraine that it turned out was basically a Russian document that American officials had, and I'm not making this up, they had run it through basically Google Translate or some other kind of online translation software, stuck a White House crest on the top of it and said, right, there's the American peace plan, even though the vast, most of it was Russian inspired. So Marco Rubio and others, the Secretary of State, have been working hard to kind of now turn it into something more palatable. I think it's now a 19-point peace plan, but of course, the more you make it palatable for Ukraine, the less you make it palatable for Russia. So I think the chances of this going anywhere major are pretty slim, but let's see what happens in Abu Dhabi and then in the conversations that President Zelensky is going to have with President Trump later this week.
The other big thing, and we watch this as South Africa so closely, is Israel's continued genocide in Gaza. I mean, there is a sort of peace. I mean, not a peace that I would want to be living under in any way, shape or form. Do you have any sense at all that life for the Palestinians at some point might improve and there will be peace for everybody there?
Well, I think we can say that very marginally it has improved in that there is at least now a fragile peace that appears in a shaky fashion to be taking hold. But insufficient quantities of humanitarian aid are getting in by a long chalk. This plan that the Israelis and the Americans appear to have to start redeveloping the bit of Gaza that the Israelis have and essentially then kind of attaching it to greater Israel, further pushing the civilian population of Gaza into an ever-shrinking piece of terrain. The whole notion of Trump Gaza, this Riviera-style resort that he had planned to pursue, all of that is anathema to countries throughout the region other than Israel. And I think that, it is tremendously uncertain where all of this heads. President Trump is desperate to be able to say he solved the problem. He doesn't like getting into the minutiae and the details of the 8 wars that he claims to have solved. They weren't all wars, but let's not, go through all of those. He just wants to get it done, dusted, and be able to say, right, I've solved it, I'm ready for my Nobel Peace Prize. The reality is this thing isn't close to resolution. And for Palestinian civilians, trying just to rebuild the basic needs of life, much less think about their own aspirations and their own plans for the future, we're not close to beginning that conversation.
We've literally got half a minute left. The other big thing, it came up at the G20 actually, was changing the United Nations and the Security Council. I mean, Africa needs a seat, probably too, so do other parts of the world. And yet there is so much opposition to that.
We've been having this conversation, for 35 years.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I've gone to the United Nations General Assembly, year after year after year, you get told that one of the big agenda items is reform of the international security architecture, which means reform of the United Nations Security Council. As long as you've got the permanent 5 and they can't agree, the 5 members of the Security Council, to the kind of reform that's going to open that Security Council truly up, it goes nowhere year after year after year and makes the UN, unfortunately, less relevant.
Simon, it's been wonderful having you here. Thank you very much.
You're
going to go back to Washington. We will always make sure that you have a home with us here.
I deeply appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Can't wait to come back.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Simon Marx, our international correspondent, as we say farewell to him. Unfortunately, he is leaving us.